Fair enough, fair enough. Don't blame me, I'm just the messenger. In 1772, brethren, William Preston, who is in part responsible for so much of the ritual that we work today, wrote the following. Were the privileges of masonry to be common or indiscriminately bestowed, the design of the institution would be subverted. For being familiar, like many other important matters, they would soon lose their value and sink into disregard. That's William Preston about 240 years ago. So indeed, brethren, masonry is in a period of transition, a period of reckoning, as to whether we will heed Brother Preston's words or allow our craft to be offered up on the cheap and in an instant, until it's overrun by those who want to flaunt the privilege of being called a mason without being the least bit concerned with working in the quarries to earn that honour. If we do the former, if we heed Brother Preston's words, then I think we have an opportunity to recover that which some would say has been lost. But if we do the latter, then I shouldn't be surprised within only one generation, masonry as we know it will no longer exist. Despite, dare I say, even because of the number of people who enter into it as a mere curiosity, easily obtained by a simple exchange of currency without any real regard for what it truly means or has meant to thousands across the globe. Put another way, masonry is not for everyone, and nor should we feel that it should be. But if one is going to pursue it, then there is no way to avoid the fact that one must make time to do so and invest genuine effort in the process. And that brings me to this little book I've written, Observing the Craft, and the concept behind the idea of observance. Now, that term observance is not in any way new to masonry. At the end of every meeting in my jurisdiction, the chaplain prays to the Supreme Architect of the universe that we may practice thy precepts in the rigid observance in the tenets of Freemasonry. Some have asked me, well, are you talking about traditional observance? We've heard of these traditional observance lodges. Is that what it is that you're talking about? Well, with respect and admiration to the brethren who have indeed laboured under this term, I do not mean traditional observance. Because we simply cannot claim that traditional masonry is observant masonry as we would define it. That is to say, we cannot claim to hold sole ownership of what is merely traditional in the fraternity, because other traditions have existed at the same time which we might find odious. Some of you may know that the debate between lodges where philosophy and decorum are the order of the day and lodges where men get together basically to socialise and drink, this debate is not even remotely new. It goes back to the very beginning of speculative masonry, with men meeting in taverns 300 years ago. So, while one can and will argue that the traditions of masonry involve solemn initiatic experiences, reflective discussions, and exceptional ritual, unfortunately one must also concede that the traditions of masonry, the traditional experience of masonry, also has included one-day conferrals, multiple candidates, and drunken revelry. And the minute books of many of our lodges confirm this, including the same admonishments to the brethren regarding such revelry that we can find in those books. So, this means that both forms of practice can lay claim to being traditional, and that arguably takes the T out of the TO in traditional observance. Tradition is not what we seek. We are interested in much more than those selective practices we enjoy that are established by the passage of time. And we're not interested in merely doing things the way they've always been done. Right? Tradition. What we are seeking, what we can claim, is the observance of the intent of our historical founders and the restoration of lodges to that intended observance. It is in that intent that we find Freemasonry defined as what Robert Adam, founding master of my lodge, expressed in 1783, when he said that we should be, in the eyes of the community and ourselves, a sacred asylum of temperance, order, and decorum. and the rigid school of social virtue. Another aspect of this semantic dance between traditional observance, I would ask you to think of two fountain pens, both 100 years old. One is in a rusty condition, it hasn't been used, it can no longer write. The other one is in pristine condition, it writes perfectly, it's had constant use. Both of these 100-year-old pens are traditional. Observance is pensmanship, regardless of whether you're using one of those pens or a pencil. Tradition is a debate over who owns history. Observance is something we all can do if we simply choose to. So, in this book, I've used the term simply observant, and I refer to observant lodges and observant masons, and I would fraternally encourage those brothers who are doing traditional observance lodges to instead consider themselves as such. I sincerely believe that that one word, which has been with us from the beginning, is both stronger in meaning and less ambiguous, and it will aid us in our efforts to increase the overall quality of the Masonic art, as well as to explain what we are trying to do to brethren who are curious about it. And that leads me into an attempt to define what it is I'm talking about. In the simplest sense, when we use the term observance in relation to any discipline of philosophy, we're talking about a careful attention to and practice of what might be considered the essential tenets of that discipline. Another way to explain it is, again, the effort to do everything involved with that discipline as correctly as possible, to the best of your ability. In the Masonic sense, observance means seeing to it that certain methods and characteristics of Masonic labour are carried out to the highest standard that can be possibly attained by a lodge. I'm not talking about a specific ritual or a unified form of practice, but rather the maximum degree of performance that can be expected from any given lodge, whatever their ritual or practice may be. Yet that being said, there are common elements of practice which will indicate observance in any lodge. Decorum, excellence in ritual, and reverence for the same are indispensable in an observant lodge. What I'd like to do now is leave that first element of definition to one side and talk about what observance is in a more profound sense and how that concept relates to observing the craft. Observance is as much a state of mind as it is a set of actions. In fact, each helps the other reach their maximum potential. The things we think and the philosophical attitude we cultivate as regards Freemasonry and her associated concerns will influence and improve our actions in the lodge. At the same time, the actions we perform in lodge, when done well and to a degree of proficiency, aid the mind in maintaining its disciplined state in ritual and introspection. And the goal to be achieved by this activity is a high state of concentration on exactly those things we find in the craft which enable us to be that better man. It's a deliberately contemplative union between the mind and body, which then enables us to take the result of that union into the soul. In other words, observance is both a state of mind that manifests itself through a set of actions, and a set of actions which helps cultivate a specific state of mind. And the overall experience, when done properly, can create a sense of deep fulfillment in an almost otherworldly atmosphere within the lodge and among the brethren involved. If we were to attempt to define the essential tenets of Freemasonry that we're seeking to observe, I think we have to go back to certain concepts, notably those ideas from the Enlightenment that form the basis of why we're doing what we're doing. We also have to examine the source of those ideas. No era is born of a vacuum. Every age is influenced either positively or negatively by what has come before it. The men who formulated the ideas which have become known as the Enlightenment were directly inspired and essentially motivated by the philosophical studies of the late Renaissance. Specifically, the notion that man truly could become more than he had been, in both the spiritual and temporal sense. This notion reaches its fruition in the concept of the higher man, closer to God, and therefore to knowledge itself.